Okay, hi everyone. In today's conversation with authors, we have the author of the recently published The Poet Empress, Shen Tao. And I'm really thankful, Shen, for of you to come to my channel. I know that it must be super busy for you recently because The Poet Empress has been out for a few months, and I keep seeing this book talk about everywhere. But just to get things started, can you introduce yourself to the audience here?
Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you so much, Petrik. It was really nice to be here and an honor to speak with you. I am Shen Tao. I'm the author of The Poet Empress, which is a fantasy about a young girl who has to enter an imperial court in order to save her family from a famine, essentially. And after she gets there, she realizes that the heir that she's essentially betrothed to is super cruel and vicious, and she has to then learn to kill him. But in this world, women are not allowed to read. So, so the only way she can see to kill him is with a poem spell, because in this world, poetry is magic. But so she has to learn to read in secret to write the spell to kill him. So that is my debut novel. I've been writing for many, many years now, and this is my first published book after writing a whole bunch of them. I think I wrote 8 books before The Poet Empress. And so The Poet Empress was my 9th book, but the first to be published. And yeah, I've just wanted to be a writer for since forever. So it's really great and a total dream come true to be able to actually publish my first book, after writing for so long. So yeah, that's a little bit about me and a little bit about my book.
So wait, so you've been writing for so many years then by now?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Actually, I've always wanted to be a writer. I think
Oh,
if you asked me when I was like 6 or 7 years old, and people would be like, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" And I think I would have said writer even then. And of course, my mind,
really?
as a
Really?
kid, you kind of have all sorts of ideas. Like I wanted to be like like animal farmer at one point because I really liked animals, and I wanted to be a teacher at one point because there was this really cool field trip, and I wanted to go on a field trip again. So of course there were different phases, but I think the one that's been most consistent is to be a writer. So it's always been a goal of mine. I've always worked at it, and it's always been in the background. Like even as I was going through school for other things and working in other fields, and it's never left my mind. And I've always been working on my craft and improving and writing all the stories. So yeah, and that brings us to today when I finally get to be a full-time author, which is really neat and really exciting. And it's been a lifelong dream realized and come true.
That's that's amazing. Congratulations, seriously. And I genuinely think that, as you probably know by now, it is one of the best debut that I have ever read. And I've been a book reviewer for almost 10 years now. Just absolutely incredible, seriously. I can only praise it. It's so good. It's so good.
That really means a lot. I mean, we chatted a little bit before the
Mm.
before our interview, and I mentioned I've seen your names on your name on the reviews of some of my favorite books, and so it genuinely means a lot that you feel this way about my book, and you were able to take the time out of your, I'm sure it's really busy schedule to read it. So, 10 years,
Yeah,
wow, that's a really long
yeah, I
time.
know.
It's
I feel
fantastic.
old.
Yeah. Did you always know that book reviewing was going to be your career too, or was that something you came into?
Nah, not really. Unlike you, you already knew that you're going to become a writer since you were young. I never thought I would become a book reviewer or booktuber. I mean, YouTube didn't even exist yet back then. But I don't know. I have loved reading since I was a kid. I do love reading manga. Usually, I read manga a lot since I was a kid, and then I just decided to read novels like about almost 10 years ago, like really dedicate myself to read novels about 10 years ago. So well, here we are today. But yeah, it has been an amazing journey. I really love reading. I think books and stories, they always means a lot to me. And yeah, and your books is now one of them.
Yeah, well, that's fantastic. I think I've always loved reading too, and
Mm,
yeah, it's amazing to be part of this, creative business and kind
mm,
of it always blows my mind every time that we're actually able to make a living from something
yeah,
we love, like reading books, writing books, and just being in this intensely creative
true.
profession and connect with people. It's amazing. So.
So I'm curious, how did the Poet Empress really came to be? I mean, you mentioned that this is the ninth book that you read, and if I'm not mistaken, you did mention that you initially tried to write books for the market, but for this one, you really write from your heart. I could be wrong. I could be wrong about this, but how did this differ in the writing process between writing for the market and also writing from, well, whatever you want?
Yeah, you actually did get that right. So,
Okay.
because I mentioned it's such a long journey to publication for me, there were some books in the middle where I sort of lost my way and my identity as a writer. When you're first starting out as a writer, you can write whatever you want, and there's no expectations and no rules, and so that's how I started off writing. And it was basically whatever. So I started off writing from the heart, and then and I got increasingly, I wouldn't say frustrated, but I guess I would say impatient with because
Uh,
I had written so many books and it was taking me so long to get published, and I was thinking like, what am I doing wrong? Like should I write some books around me that I feel are popular, and so I
mhm.
tried to write a little bit to the market around, I would say, book 6, book 7, book 8.
Mm.
I think are a little bit more geared towards the market than I think my heart would have wanted me to, and
Okay.
and so and so that's what I mean when I talk about having written to the market at certain points in my writing career. I don't think it was a bad thing. I don't think it's a bad thing for authors to consider what readers want to read if that is your goal, right? I think
Yeah.
if you're a writer who is just writing for the love of it, sure, write whatever you want. If you're writing to get published and make a book into a commercial product that will hopefully reach readers as they want to do, I think it is a good thing. It's not a bad thing entirely for writers to be
Yeah.
aware of what the market is and what are the types of things being published. So that was important for me to learn and to know, and to not just be in my bubble and just think about what I wanted to write, but also what people wanted to read. So that was very important. With the Poet Empress, with my ninth book, I pulled back a little bit from that because what I was doing clearly wasn't working either. So I was able to go back to my roots and why I loved writing and just pull back and write something I was really passionate about and wasn't geared towards the market. And it really isn't, right? If you look at the Poet Empress, it's at the time it came out, it was during a time when romantasy was really booming. So
Yeah.
much so that I think a lot of people do mistake the Poet Empress for romantasy because of what is surrounding it. And I think if I was writing to the market, I would probably be writing one of those books. But the Poet Empress does, as you know, it doesn't really fit into that mold. It's a
Yeah.
lot darker than I think what the market might expect. It's a lot. It's very culturally rooted too, and very
Yeah.
rooted in my heritage, and so that isn't necessarily like what is the most booming in the market right now either. So I think all of those factors made it so that when I was writing the book, I really didn't think it was going to be successful. Like I think I wrote it after I finished writing it. I knew it was the best thing I've ever written on like a craft level because I just kept getting better and better with every book, as you should. So it would be really bad if it wasn't the best thing I've written at that point. But I think I had felt like I reached a new level of craft with that book in the way I felt like things tied together, just the amount of like raw emotion and passion I poured into the project. And I knew that it was so much better on a craft level than everything that had come before it in terms of
Uh-huh.
books written. But I also didn't feel like it was going to find its readers because of the reasons I mentioned. So it was a
Mhm.
total surprise when it actually, I think when you write from the heart, I think when you write a book that you put your 100% in, I think people can really tell. And,
Yeah.
it doesn't matter if it's not something that's popular in the market right now. It doesn't matter if it's darker than people would expect.
Yeah.
There is that if there is that level of dedication in the book, I think people can really tell compared to like all the books that I wrote before that were maybe less passionate and more to the market, if that makes sense. So
Yeah.
I think I was fully surprised because I didn't expect that to be a major factor in a book's success. But in
Mm.
hindsight, I shouldn't have been. It totally makes sense. When you're reading, you want the author to have given their 100%. You don't want them to have been writing the book just for the sake of publishing
Yeah.
something, right?
True.
So yeah, total surprise that it was a success. Totally grateful and honored that it's finding so many readers and publishers are believing in this book. And yeah, for sure. So it's been a whole experience with this one.
I think it's going to be even bigger from now on. Seriously, I have no doubt about it. Yeah, usually the trajectory of the Poet Empress, the one that Poet Empress is experiencing right now, is just a sign that it's just going to get bigger and bigger. So, congrats on
Thank you.
that.
Appreciate that.
Yeah, I don't know if you noticed, but there might has been some reviews, and this is in my review as well, that compare this a little bit to the Sword of Kaigen by M.L. Wang. Yeah, I don't know if you have read that, but it's the same. Something about this book, no, it's the content is actually different, but something about writing different, not to the market. The Sword of Kaigen is super different compared to so many books are being published right now, and it is also a standalone novel. But there is something about this that reminded many of us to that book, and it's in a good way. And I think that's what really hitting with many readers right now. And yeah, it's really dark. It's super dark. I did not expect the Poet Empress would get that dark. And when Thor Bramble, this is the book, yeah, actually approached me saying that this is a romantasy, I was quite a bit taken aback because I don't usually read romantasy, but I decided to give a few chapters a read, and this is different. So, do you think the marketing that this book is romantasy? Do you think this is, I don't know, improving the audience reach for your book?
Yeah. So as for the marketing of this book,
Yeah.
I I have mixed feelings about it. I think
Mm,
I I certainly don't th think that the publisher is marketing it as romantasy, or at least from my perspective. I feel like they're pretty
mm.
aligned that it's epic fantasy, but the way that it gets shelved sometimes, I think there are
Oh,
maybe assumptions that are being made. And I do have mixed feelings about it. On the one hand, I think that a rising tide lifts all ships, right? And
yeah.
I'm actually really grateful to romantasy books and the romantasy industry because
Mm,
it's bringing reading into so many lives. So many readers are being introduced to fantasy and through romantasy, and so there's so much cross pollination of readers, and
yeah.
I don't think it's I think some people well, okay, so let me back up a little bit. I feel like my feelings on that has changed. When the
Yeah.
Poet Empress was first being published, I was pretty scared that it would be shelved as romantasy because I didn't want readers to go in with the wrong expectations. I knew it
Yeah.
was maybe romantasy adjacent, but it wasn't romantasy, and I wanted to protect readers from not their expectations not being met. I wanted to protect my book from those expectations not being met. But I think my stance on that has since changed because I feel
Mm,
like readers like I read romantasy sometimes. I'm a
yeah.
primarily fantasy reader, but I read and enjoy romantasy. I read and enjoy all sorts of genres. I read literary fiction. I read, contemporary, like historical. I read all horror, all kinds of fiction. And I think romantasy readers readers who primarily read romantasy are also able to read many other genres and enjoy many other
Yeah.
books. And I feel like at the end of the day, genres are just a kind of a marketing label. Their initial impression of do I want to pick this book off a bookshelf and examine it further? If I'm a fantasy fan, I can go to the sci-fi fantasy section, and I might not take home every book I pick up, but I certainly might be intrigued enough to pick up a book and flip the cover, maybe look at some reviews and decide whether to take that book home with me or not, right? So I think genres are a useful label in many respects. I don't think they encompass everything. I don't think every book, even romantasy books or fantasy books, neatly fit into each category. And I think readers are, educated. They read rightly, and I don't think there should be that strong barrier between different genres, if that makes sense.
Mm, yeah. Yeah. That makes sense. Makes sense. Yeah. Well, I'm just happy that this reached so many readers right now. And as I said, this is going to be much bigger than probably what you expect, probably.
Appreciate
And,
that. Hope so.
w- one of the things that I love so much about the Poet Empress, even though it is told from the perspective of Wei, yeah,
Mhm.
in first person, but you have incorporated this flashback portion of Mako and Terran. I think the flashback of Mako and Terran, without spoilers, they are some of the best chapters of the book for me. They just shed so much details and layers to the entire narrative in the Poet Empress. And I'm just curious, which one was the easiest and the hardest for you to write between these characters, Wei, Mako, and Terran?
Oh, that's a really interesting question. So Wei and Taryn are obviously the two main characters. Wei is the most main
Yeah,
character. She is our perspective character and our first person
yeah,
narrator. And the prince that she's, the cruel prince that she's betrothed to that I alluded to is Prince Taryn, the heir of the Azalea dynasty and the second son of the emperor. So those are probably the two main characters. I
mm,
will say that they are maybe more difficult to write because as I get into the headspace, and we've alluded to the fact that the Poet Empress is a darker book, so
yeah,
they are necessary characters and perspectives for me to inhabit and write in, but not necessarily the most enjoyable. So I wouldn't necessarily, because those headspaces are such dark places, so I wouldn't necessarily say that they are my favorite. So Maro, on the other hand, so he is the eldest son of the
yeah,
Azalea dynasty and the one who should have been heir, and the one who kind of has been replaced by Terran, the second son.
Terran.
And he feels resentful of that, and there's a whole conflict between the two brothers and so forth. But I actually found that his diary entries were also some of my favorite parts to write because yeah, like yes, his story is quite dark, but his diary entries are filtered through a child's point of view, and there's this
Mm,
touch of innocence, and there's not really understanding. I mean, you see that with Wei too. I think she doesn't fully understand the horrors that she's going through, and we as a
yeah,
reader in a layer of perspective that she doesn't have, and we are able to see from an outside perspective, like, hey, a lot of what you're going through right now is pretty messed up that she doesn't really realize. I think that effect is extra magnified with Morrow. I think because he's writing from a child's eye, he doesn't understand bribery. He doesn't understand what the manipulations are going around him
mm,
and what he is being subject to. And so yes, his story is dark, but I think there's this level of like innocence and this level of love, more importantly,
mm,
that made his diary entries really enjoyable to write because it is very rooted in love and very rooted in a young kid trying to figure out how the world works. And I felt like I was watching him grow up almost in a way as I was writing his journals across the years.
aw. Now I feel sad again.
It was definitely
But yeah, I think
a sad thing to write.
you
So
you have done an outstanding job on these characters. I mean, I'm interviewing right now. The memory is still really fresh in my mind. But I think one of the biggest exposure on the Port Empress is the several special editions that your book get, like the Illumi Crate, the Art Crate, and also the Fake Crate. And also, not only that, the Trade Edition. I'm going to show the people here. This is the UK hardcover. The cover art here is done by Yohei Horishita or Yohei Horisota. Yeah, but the US cover art is done by Kelly Chong. But as you can probably see, talking to the audience here, this is beautiful cover art for both edition. But also the Port Empress, if you are active on Bookstagram or Twitter or YouTube, you might have seen the Illumi Crate and also the Alt Crate edition. And I'm curious, do you have a role in choosing the cover artist or the artwork progress and all that across this many edition?
oh, that's a great question. Especially because I love all the editions of the Poet Empress,
Yeah,
and I don't say that lightly or because I'm obligated to say that. I generally feel like each and every edition has just turned out like unbelievably stunning, and
yeah,
sometimes I can't believe that it's this book and my book that gets like this amazing art and
mm,
these amazing covers. Yes, authors do get a say in the cover process, and every single piece
mm,
of art that goes along the way, I get approval on. So, with the special editions, you get to see sketches first. You get to
yeah,
even before the sketches, they kind of talk about this is what I foresee as being the cover. I envision this scene with like her over here and him over there and the knives in the ceiling or whatever.
yeah,
So usually the curators of the special editions will come in with a vision, and that's what they're great at, right? The art directors, they know exactly what they envision the book is going to look like.
yeah,
And so even before we pick the artists, they have a vision in mind. And then they also have artists in mind usually and say, here are the artists I see fitting my vision. What do you think of these artists? So then you can go through them and say, I feel like this artist might fit, and so forth. And then when it comes to the actual sketches, you do get a say too at every stage of the process, is the sketches, the line art, and then the final version. And all of the quotes they choose, everything is approved by the author. So yeah, absolutely, authors get a say.
That's good.
I didn't
That's
need
really
to have any input, for the record. The piece of art came in like so perfect. I was just like, yeah, that sounds really good. and then so I just said yes to everything, and it just turned out so well. So and that's something I like to do too. As you know, I'm aware that as an author, my job is to write words, and that's what I'm good at. And I'm not necessarily a good art director or a cover designer. I don't necessarily know marketing, right? So I tend to, when I can, leave it to people who know better than I do, and they do, and it's worked out great so far. So
yeah, well, I do think that it is worth. I'm happy to hear that you actually have input on all these illustrations, because I do think that authors definitely should have a say in. Well, it is their book too, after all. And yeah, I have the All Crate edition here. Ta-da! Oh, stunning, man! Stunning! It's so stunning.
love it.
And this is Terran, for everyone who's wondering, and you can see the Tao on his cheek.
Yeah.
And this is related to my next question, because how did you come up with literomancy for this book? I don't think I actually expected the magic system or the magic would be this kind of magic in this book at all. And I love how you incorporate Mandarin. Yeah, I speak Mandarin as well, and I just love how you incorporate that into this world of the Poet Empress.
Yeah, thank you. I so let me back off a little. I have
Yeah.
a lot of ideas usually as a writer who's been writing for so long. I have all sorts of ideas for magic systems, all sorts of ideas for worlds, and I have this huge document that has all my ideas, and it's many hundreds of pages long. And
Wow.
many years
Okay.
ago, I had put poetry magic in there just off of something I don't remember, and I think the ideas sort of simmer as a writer throughout the years, and they're always in the back of your mind. And sometimes it just is the right time for it to come out. And for this case, you know, it was I had that kernel of the idea somewhere, and then the setting actually came after. First, I thought, wouldn't it be interesting to have a poetry magic system? And then I started writing the character, and I wrote the first few chapters actually very quickly. And I was at that time I was still exploring the characters and exploring the world, and everything fell into place very naturally, like her voice and her innocence, you know, and the whole magic system. So I was writing, it began naturally to fall into this East Asian or Chinese inspired setting.
Yeah.
I think because of the poetry magic, actually, and because of the nature of the protagonist and what her motivations are and what her family, you know, dynamics are. And I think part of that subconscious inspiration comes from the fact that poetry is very big in Chinese culture. And I don't know what your experience with it is, but for me as a kid, I had to memorize like hundreds of Chinese poems. I think that was a very large part of you know, the culture for me and part of my upbringing. And you know, you'd be a kid and you recite it in front of your aunts and uncles, and they would clap and whatever. And I'm sure I've forgotten them all, but for me, it was something I didn't fully appreciate when I was younger, because there was so much layer of meaning in every single piece of Chinese poem that I memorized those words, but I didn't know what they meant. And it wasn't until much later that when you look back at them, you're like, wow, these poems actually mean so much. Like I remember this one poem that talks about returning home. I think it's by He Zhizhuang, or I don't know if you know the one I'm talking about, but it talks about somebody who leaves his village when he was younger and comes back as an old man. And when he comes back to his village, you know, his old hometown, he still has his like hometown he accent, or he lost it somewhere along the way, and the children in the village don't recognize him, even though this is where he comes from, his hometown. And I just
Yeah.
found that poem so poignant, like to the point I almost teared up as an adult. And that's when I had memorized as a kid, didn't really understand it.
Mm.
I almost teared up as an adult reading it because it just spoke so much about we all come from somewhere, and we all
Yeah.
sometimes, like I as an immigrant left home pretty early, right? And to the point that when I was returning home recently with my mom, who grew
Yeah.
up in, so we're from Nanchang, and
Mm.
when my mom was there, she had grown up in China and had lived there all my life, and we were just driving around the city that used to be, and she was pointing out like across the river, it used to be complete, like nothing there. It would be like literally marshland, when she was growing
Yeah.
up, and now it's skyscrapers. Now it's so developed. And
Yeah.
I was asking my mom, I was like, where are the streets that you remember? And she said nothing. She doesn't remember. She doesn't recognize any of it. And I thought,
Wow.
wow, this is like, she's coming back after 10 years, after 20 years. And yeah, it's just changed so much that it's unrecognizable. I think she's changed so much. And I think we all grow in inexorable ways when we leave a place. And
Yeah.
going back to it, do the people home recognize us? Probably not. Do we recognize the place? Maybe not. So there's a lot of layers of meaning into that. And this is a total tangent. I just wanted to talk about that.
No, it's okay.
Yeah, same with the Chun Xiao poem. It's like, how many blossoms fell in the night when the
Yeah.
storm was raging, and you wake up and you don't. And that's a very famous poem. I think a lot of kids know it, and I certainly memorized that poem. But as an
Mm.
adult coming back to it, it really hit. It was like, when you wake up and the birds are singing, and you don't know anything about the storm. You remember there was a storm raging on, but the birds are singing. It's a beautiful morning, and you don't know how
Mm.
many blossoms fell in the night. And that really hit like a truck, so much so
Mm.
that I had named my so if you look at the UK arc of the Poet
Yeah.
Empress, it was Hualo Shop, and I had sort of named it
Yeah,
after.
this one, right?
Yes, yes, exactly.
Yeah.
The last line of that poem, because I thought it was very fitting for a lot of the events that had gone through. Like you end up at the end of the poem, and you kind of see the results, and maybe the birds are singing somewhere, and there was a raging storm somewhere in the night that
Yeah.
the events of the characters had to go through, and you don't really realize that at the end, just how much turmoil had passed through in the night. So yeah, I think I'm really glad I was able to bring back that, honor that poetic tradition a little bit. Maybe not directly, because all the poems that are in the Poet
Yeah.
Empress are written in English necessarily, right, for an English audience. And I wouldn't be able to write really great poetry in Chinese, I think, because I'm much more trained. I've been writing in English all my life. But I was able to indirectly honor that part of my heritage, because I think it's so important. And maybe this book will bring a little bit more spotlight into classical Chinese poetry. I don't know, but it's just such a big part of the culture there that I think when I was writing the Poet Empress, it fell naturally into that setting and that kind of way of thinking.
Yeah. I remember when I got this advanced reading copy, my parents were the one who actually opened this book. And then my mom immediately told me, see this poem? This is the one that I taught you since you were a kid. I'm like, oh, is this one?
Yeah.
It's so funny. But yeah, I don't know. I still speak Mandarin to my parents, but it's
Mhm.
still very, very difficult for me to write because I never practiced really hard on writing. I just speak them because my parents keep on speaking Mandarin to me since I was a kid.
Mhm.
But yeah, as an Asian diaspora myself, I think I understand a lot of things that you actually said here. And
Yeah,
yeah, I think
yeah.
you did a great job incorporating poetry and also the literomancy into your book.
Thank
And
you.
many people will be wondering about this. This is a fantastic standalone novel, especially in Western market. Speaking from my perspective, I don't see a lot of satisfying epic fantasy standalone novel, and I do consider the Poet Empress to be one of the best ones out there. But if someone were to ask you, let's say we are fans of the Poet Empress, what books would you recommend to us to read?
Ooh, that's a great question. I think there's a lot of similarities, I think, between the Poet Empress and some of the other Asian-inspired standalones out there. I'm not really sure if that's like, or fantasy books in particular, not necessarily standalones. I don't know if it's because we draw inspiration from similar base
Yeah,
books, like the Chinese classics, and some of it can be pretty brutal, but the poppy word comes to mind immediately.
yeah.
I think because it has similar levels of darkness and brutality, and similarly Chinese inspired setting.
Mm,
The popular, I this is kind of another side of the spectrum, but I feel like if you haven't read Holly Black's The Cruel Prince, I think it's a really excellent book
yeah.
and really excellently written, and it has just great, because it's also kind of a political intrigue book about,
Okay.
narrated by a first person and as a cruel prince. But I really admire her world building. I think it's fantastic. I think Blood Over Bright Haven is a great
Oh yeah.
standalone for that people of the Poet Empress. I haven't read Sword of Kaiden. It's amazing you
Oh.
mentioned it earlier, because it was definitely on my list, and I do want to read it at one point, but I haven't read it yet. But I
Mm,
can say I have read Blood Over Bright Haven, and I think it might be a really great um, follow up to the Poet Empress if you like that book, because it does have touch on similar dark themes, and it is also a standalone. That one is a
yeah.
standalone. So
Absolutely, absolutely. Wow, great recommendation. I haven't read The Cruel Prince yet, but I love Blood Over Bright Haven. So in love, and also the Poppy War. So yeah,
oh yeah,
and
yeah,
this
fantastic.
is a standalone as a standalone novel. I think many people will be asking about this because do you have any plan to turn this into a series, or maybe from my perspective here, I really love that the fact that this is a one of a standalone novel. Again, we don't get many of them in epic fantasy, but I wouldn't mind having more stories in the world of Tensha, or yeah, in this world.
Yeah, that's a great question, because at one point when I was writing the book, I did have plans for a trilogy, and I was actively
Okay.
planning for it. And I don't know about other fantasy authors. I can't speak to them, but for me, I've grown up reading these series, of course. And
Mm,
when I write a fantasy book, by default, I'm writing a series. You know what I mean? I'm
yeah.
never setting off to write a fantasy standalone. At least that's how I work as an author, based on the books I read. Uh, so when I was writing The Poet Empress, it was going to be a series. But when I was at a certain point when I was writing the book, I realized
Mm,
that it's not possible for this to be a series, because of the
mm,
way I wanted the book to end, and because of the
yeah.
themes I want to explore. I didn't want so without spoiling anything, I feel like the book of the Poet Empress is a little bit ambiguous as to whether the right thing was done in the end, and whether the dynasty
Mm,
will turn out okay. And those are pretty important themes in my book. The fact that you don't know what's right and what's wrong, and often you're just trying to do your best with the information that you've
yeah.
got. And maybe people in the future will judge you villains for it, and
Mm,
that's just part of making history, right? And so when I got to the end of the book, it was definitely a very ambiguous place as to how the dynasty was going to turn out. And if I were
yeah.
to write a sequel for this book, I realized it would be a disservice to the first book, because I would necessarily have to explore whether it is what happens afterwards. And I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to say definitively, as authorial voice, whether the decision at the end was a good one, and whether the right thing, I would have to make a moral stance. And I didn't
Yeah.
want to.
True, true. Well, whatever you decide, I will be reading them anyways, whichever book you decide to write next. But yeah, we are nearing the end of the interview here. So just to leave this with the final two questions for the next one, what do you plan to write next?
Yeah. Right
If you can say it, of course.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for the question, because I'm really excited about this next one. I'm writing a YA series right now. I've always wanted to write for young people, because I feel
Mm,
like, for me especially, I've read a lot of amazing books when I was an adult, but I feel like the books I read as a teen forever stick in my mind. You know, it was such a formative era, and a lot of the authors I read as a
True.
teen highly influenced me as a writer and the kind of books I like to read. And I thought, what a wonderful thing it would be to give back to, you know, become the formative, you know, writer for another future generation of readers. And so I've always wanted to write for a young adult. And after the Poet Empress, I'm not gonna lie, it was a little bit difficult emotionally to get into another book or to another writing project because of, I think, how dark the Poet Empress is and the kind of headspace I had to be in. So I very much wanted to get away from that. I wanted to
Okay.
write something that's maybe lighter and more fun. And
Mm.
so I started working on this YA series that is a little bit more you know, upbeat. And when you're writing a YA, I think there's a little bit of a layer of optimism to it. You know, it's
Yeah.
not, it can't necessarily be so bleak as if you're writing for adult. And so there's this level of fun and optimism and fast pace and excitement that I think really helped me get back into writing after writing a book like The Poet Empress.
Yeah, well, that makes sense. Makes sense. And yeah, you're right though. I mean, I think that's also kind of why many of the main characters in epic fantasy, not the dark one, is young people. Adults usually have their views already stained by the world. And
Yeah.
yeah, I think this will be the last question of today's conversation. So, with the Poet Empress out now, how many months now? 5 months? Is it 5 months or 6 months?
Yeah, I think we're just coming up on 4 months because yeah, it's January 20th, currently
January.
May 22nd. So yeah, just over 4 months.
Yeah. And with readers, many readers in the future will be reading into this one. Would you consider as as a success? And what do you hope for readers to get out of reading the Poet Empress?
Oh, yeah, that's a really interesting question because what does success look like as an author? I think it really
Yeah.
changes. I think we mentioned when I was writing The Poet Empress, I didn't think it would be successful at all. And
Yeah.
when I was writing it, I remember telling my agent, I thought if 100 people read it, I would be so happy and fulfilled as a writer because I had worked so hard on this book and just for it to reach a few readers. I mean, even now, like every single reader who reads it and reaches out just means so much because at the end of the day, we write to connect with people, right? And if there's a
Yeah.
human on the other end receiving those words, I think that's and that's kind of the magic system of the Poem Empress too. You know, if the emotions and the truth reaches somebody, in the Poet Empress's case, the ancestors, then there's magic happening in between. So so yeah, I think success was and continues to look like the book just reaching readers. I think that's
Yeah.
all that matters in the end. And whenever I get too in my head about, you know, as a debut author, you go through all sorts of stresses, all sorts of like, you know, you can't help but feel like even with a very successful book, you know, you could still feel like you're behind in some metrics if you look at the right
Yeah.
metrics. And
Yeah.
so if you just pull back from that and realize like what really matters in the end, I think it really helps. At least it helps me get through a lot of the debut stressors because you know, this thing happens or this thing happens, and then I think, oh wait, but it's reaching readers, and you know, I'm getting amazing messages weekly about like how much people enjoy this book, and it's really special. So yeah, I think that's what success means to me.
Yeah. Well, as the book says, remember who you're doing it for, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, yeah, that's pretty much the end of today's conversation with Shen Tao. But for those of you who haven't read this book, I highly, highly recommend this one. And it is an amazing standalone novel. And again, I just want to say thank you so much to Shen Tao for coming to my YouTube channel. It means a lot, and I wish you success in your future books as well.
Thank you so much for having me, Petrik. It was really special to be on here and for your amazing questions. I think I had a lot of you know, fun answering them and talking to you. So I really appreciate that.
Yeah, hope you'll be back to my channel someday.
Yeah, maybe with the YA book. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Cheers.
Bye bye.
Take care.